how we define emotional intimacy. It's the felt sense of closeness and trust that comes from feeling understood, accepted, and valued by another person. So the felt sense of closeness, and that word felt is really important, okay? Because it's about really knowing that you've got somebody in your corner, that you've got somebody who wants you to thrive, who has your best interest at heart. Okay. And emotional intimacy comes from that feeling that it is absolutely there and inside. Okay. So it's that felt sense. And so when we go into a little more detail, okay, I wanted to bring up, because here we'll see this question. Oopsie, let me make it bigger for you. Okay, so we had 3 people that basically asked the exact same question. Hi, Ty. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in. From Nuna, Shelly, and Dolores, basically we're all saying to me, what does emotional intimacy actually look like? Like, what is it actually, as opposed to this sort of amorphous thing of like, yeah, of course, we all kind of know it's good and we've heard about it and people talk about it. So I'd love it if you could type into the chat what it looks and feels like when you are close to someone. So think about almost like, what would it look like if you had somebody taking a videotape of you together with your partner? Like, what would they see in terms of how you two are interacting with each other? And what would you feel in terms of like, how do you know when you're feeling emotionally close? So go ahead, if anybody feels comfortable typing in on the chat, what does it look like and feel like to be emotionally close to somebody? Shelly said vulnerability. And interesting, this was your question, I think. So you have the answer. Vulnerability is the thing that leads to intimacy 100% of the time. There's no way to feel intimate without vulnerability. So there's got to be a certain amount of taking risks. So vulnerability is interesting, right? Because if you think about sort of the inside of a crab, right? Like you've got the shell that's protecting that inside, that vulnerable, that tender part, right? And so the shell kind of feels like it's a good thing, but the vulnerability is the tender part on the inside and how good it feels to be able to be authentic. So Elisa's saying, share yourself with total honesty. That's exactly right. Like this authenticity that you can be completely real with somebody and they're there anyway, that you don't have to pretend with them. Ty is saying playfulness, right? Playfulness is when you're just like letting your hair down and you can tease that person in a tender way, or you're just like joking around, inside jokes. That's all that experience of knowing, like, basically I am my authentic self and you are glad that to be around me and you're glad that you can be your authentic self. So it's this like mutual sense of shared vulnerability. Okay. So here we're going to dive into the 5 lies, the 5 myths about emotional intimacy. Okay. So number 1 is that men don't care about emotional intimacy. So this is so important. So important. Okay. Because people believe this myth to be so true that they kind of repeat this stereotype, right? That men don't care about emotional intimacy, that men only care about physical intimacy, and it's not important to them to be close. This is so unfair. It's so sexist. Okay. Because of course men want to feel loved, and of course women want to feel loved, and of course non-binary people want to feel loved. Everybody needs to feel loved. And I know this because we are biologically wired for attachment. Okay. So when you think about attachment theory, and this might get a little bit heady for a minute, so hang in there with me, okay? We've got John Bowlby here, and he is considered like the father of attachment theory, and he's the first one that basically said, you know, if you think about a little baby, in order to survive, they don't just need food and water, they need a primary attachment figure that's going to take care of them, okay? And that everybody needs this. Sue Johnson is a couples therapist, and she's famous for taking this attachment theory and applying it to adults. So guess what? Not only little kids need to feel liked and loved, guess what? Adults do too. And it seems so obvious right now when I say it. I hope that this sounds like it makes sense to you guys. Please let me know in the comments. Like, does that make sense? Is that something that you feel is something that's a normal kind of understood thing that we as human beings need to feel liked, need to feel loved, need to feel like we've got somebody in our corner, regardless of gender? I see Ty is saying preach. So yeah, I appreciate that shout out. So romantic partners become each other's primary attachment figure. And so that's by offering everything you guys were talking about in terms of the vulnerability, in terms of the total honesty that Elisa brought in, comfort, reassurance. Okay, so we all need those things. Everyone needs to feel loved, regardless of genitalia. And when we are going to talk about a little bit more about gender differences when we get to myth number 5, because I also don't want to oversimplify it. There are actually, some really important differences that we can talk about. But by and large, it's really helpful to get out of those stereotypes. So here's your practical strategy. Instead of assuming like men like this and women like this, what's much more useful is to just say, I like this. What do you like? Because there may be gender differences or propensities toward how you like to feel liked, loved, and close. But if you make those assumptions, it's kind of silly when you can just basically ask that person, how do you feel? And by telling them what helps you feel close, then you are both kind of having that education of what is going to work for you. Okay, so go ahead and type in the chats some thoughtful ways that you think you might be able to ask your partner what helps you feel close. So thinking about being willing to ask your partner instead of making an assumption. It's not so easy to figure out a way to ask that person what feels good to you, what makes you feel emotionally close, how do you like to feel loved. So anybody have any ideas? Take your time. Thinking about being vulnerable is not only about reaching out to your partner with your own vulnerability, it's also about being vulnerable by asking your partner and showing them that you care about their truth and their preferences and what they like as well. So here we've got a question. I like chats and Diego likes shared activities. Really nice. So it's so good. It's so good to know what your preferences are. So the chat feels good to you. The physical activities, maybe going a hike, makes Diego feel close. And so then you have this joint sense of like, all right, we're each going to give each other what they need instead of getting in competition about it. Okay, let's see. Shelly says, what do you need to feel emotionally close to me? What do you need to feel emotionally close? It's a vulnerable question to ask. It's not as easy as you might think, especially going normally like through day-to-day life, thinking, how do you bring that question up? Well, you find a way, and the first time it's a little awkward. And then as you keep going, it gets a little bit easier. Let's see, Michael's saying, what can I do right now to help you feel more loved? What can I do right now to help you feel more loved? It's a beautiful question. Thank you for that, because you're offering something without making an assumption. Good date night question. Exactly. Date nights are a good time to ask these kinds of questions. They're much more effective than when you're like in the middle of cooking dinner or whatever. Okay, we've got something from Deborah. How do you feel about how close we are? Are you satisfied, or would you like to feel closer? That's a really wonderful question, Deborah. Thank you for that. It's like you're basically saying, how do you feel like right now? And are you satisfied? Not even assuming that you want to feel closer. I think what Deborah, what you're bringing in is like, do you want to feel closer? You might want a little more distance, right? Let's not assume it's not like more intimacy is better, more connection is automatically good. It's like, what's that balance of independence, dependence? Let's see, from Ty, I've been trying to ask, can I get you anything at least once a day? That's awesome. Can I get you anything? It's so generous and vague so that your partner gets to say whatever she wants to say. Let's see. She usually says nothing, but it actually makes me feel closer to her. Right. Right. That makes so much sense to me that you feel closer because you're asking her. And even if she doesn't have a response, that doesn't mean that it didn't land as, oh, wow, Ty is thinking of me today. And he's offering. And that makes it easier when she does have an ask to know that she's not burdening you, that that's part of being in a relationship. I love that. All right. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Just real quick, I like to let people know other ways that I can help you. So in addition to this webinar, I also have a mini empathy course, and I'm going to put that in the description. And also Michael and I have a Poconos retreat coming up. And so that's coming up October 10th. So just a real quick reminder of there's things that we have in addition to today's webinar. And also, if you just want to go and watch my YouTube videos, that's really helpful for me to be able to keep doing these kinds of webinars for you guys and giving as much free content as I possibly can, because at this phase in my life, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give as much I am trying to give it as much free content away as I possibly can, as sort of giving to the next generation of people coming in. So, okay, let's take a look at how you can help other couples. I was just going to say that the more that you come and watch my videos, that helps other couples as well, because when you leave comments or you like the videos, then the algorithm likes that, and then more and more and more people will be able to access this free information. So thank you for that. Let's see. So myth number 2 is that if you love each other, emotional intimacy just happens. If you love each other, the idea is that people sometimes worry that, or they believe that it's supposed to just be super easy. As long as you're in love, then that emotional intimacy is going to be deep, it's going to be strong, and it's going to be there. Where the reality is that it actually is not that easy. And usually in the beginning, we talked about vulnerability. In the beginning, when you're meeting a brand new person, people are vulnerable, they're asking questions about each other, they're going on dates. And as a relationship stays together longer and longer, then what happens is we get out of the habit of being vulnerable with each other, because we are just in the habit of kind of knowing that person's there, and we have obligations and we're busy, everybody's busy. Okay, so it doesn't just happen. We have to keep watering the plant. Love alone is not enough, but also intimacy declining is not a red flag to assume that love is declining, because love and intimacy are 2 different things. Okay. So love is an action verb. There's a reason that this is the title of my book. Love is an action verb. Love is something that you feel toward another person. So when I feel love for somebody else, that's an internal experience. emotional intimacy comes from me actually expressing that love, so that it's a connection, because love can go one way, but emotional intimacy has to go two ways. So it's not enough just to love. We have to express that love. Okay. And we have to do things to show that person that we love them. Okay, so here is a picture of John Gottman. If you're not familiar with his work, I'm certified in his method because I am very much impressed by the research that he does. And he has a quote that we really talk about a lot, which is called small things often. And the idea is that small things are things that we can do every single day that don't take a lot of time, but that can nurture our connection. And that this is what makes a relationship. It's not about romantic getaways for weeks at a time. You don't have to go on an exotic vacation, nor is it about really like knock down, drag out fights. It doesn't always have to be these two extremes. The main thing that leads to relationship stability is long-term connection, staying in the world together as a little touch base as you go on to the rest of your obligations into the world. Okay. So Gottman talks about giving and receiving bids for connection. So in his research, he talked about what they noticed. They had this bed and breakfast set up that was a research facility. And what they noticed is if one person just went out and looked out the window and there was like, hey, there's a boat out there. And the other person was like, really? that was considered a bid for connection. Okay. If one person says, hey, there's a boat out there, and the other person just keeps reading his newspaper, there's probably not going to be a huge fight about it. However, next time partner A sees that boat, they might not mention it to partner B. So it's a slow, steady decline by not having those bids for connection. It's a way to say, hey, I want to be in your world. Do you want to be in my world? Okay. So that's how we build emotional intimacy. We've got a question from Adrian here. I want to make this a little bigger. Okay. So Adrian wants to know, how do you make room for emotional intimacy during a transitional phase, like fatherhood or looking for a new job? I find myself struggling to connect ways for my wife and I to connect. Okay, so type me too in the chat if you can relate to this question. If you can relate to the idea of basically feeling like you don't have time to connect with your partner because you've got huge stress in your life. You've got a lot going on, and that's getting in the way of actually going on dates or asking somebody what kind of book they're reading. If you can relate this, oh, hi there, Jim over 30, I see you. Yep, really loved Gottman's work. Yes. He's got a lot that we're still learning from. So it sounds like Shelley can relate to this idea of, what do you do when you don't really feel like you have enough time to, prioritize the person who is really important to you. It's not that you don't prioritize them. It's just that you feel like you've got other things that are competing for your attention. So this is a really, really common issue in relationships. And so what we want to think about is things that you can do that are bids for connection that take less than 15 seconds at a time. So ideas for connecting that take less than 15 seconds at a time. I want you to kind of remember what I was saying about, you don't need to go on an exotic vacation. You don't need to, it's not all about fighting less or having less conflict. So the kinds of things that I recommend are sending a text, a genuine hug, stopping everything and just hugging. I love that. And how long does a hug take? I mean, a 6-second hug is a pretty long hug, especially if you're like really relaxing into it. And sometimes we feel like we don't have time to have a hug, but it's because we're not slowing down to speed up, right? You've got a lot to do and you feel like you don't have time. If you feel like you don't have time to hug your partner, there's something wrong, right? Because you do have time. Nothing's going to happen unless there's a blocked airway or splurting blood. Like most things can wait 6 seconds. So I love that. This idea of a really, really genuine hug, stopping everything. A text that says, "You looked really cute this morning. Thanks for making dinner." Okay. The other things I talk about in my workbook are things like a kiss on the head when you are leaving somebody in the morning for, like, you're on your way to work and they're still sleeping, giving them a kiss on the a kiss on the head. It could be making sure that you turn your devices off during breakfast and basically, committing to, like, we're not going to check our phones for that period of time. We're just gonna keep eating dinner, but without our phones on. Michael says sending a romantic emoji. I love that. That's really sweet. And how long does it take to, like, find the little thing on your phone, press the emoji, pick out, do you want the heart? Do you want the hug emoji? It's, I would say that's probably 4 seconds. I don't know. Somebody can time it. Okay, so myth number 3, emotional intimacy requires lots and lots of crying. This is why some people feel like they don't know how to do emotional intimacy, or they don't have time, or they don't have emotional energy, because what they picture is a whole lot of crying. They picture trauma, like you're talking about your childhood traumas. Now, that is a kind of vulnerability, and it absolutely can help you feel close. But we don't have to have lots and lots of crying as a way to feel close. In fact, there's a lot of other easier ways to do it. There are so many ways to feel emotional connection that don't have to feel painful. You don't have to feel pain in order to be vulnerable. You just have to take risks. And they're two very different things, right? Pain, we're going to avoid at all costs. A risk is like, giving somebody a hug is a risk, honestly, because what if they don't want to hug you back? Or what if you're not really in the habit of hugging each other in the middle of breakfast? There's a risk of rejection, okay? And there's a cost for doing it and feeling rejected, but there's a cost for not doing it. There's a cost for not hugging somebody or asking for a hug or grabbing their hand as you're going for a walk. Okay, so we want to remember that there's so many different ways. They all require some kind of emotional vulnerability. So we have a question from Shelley, which is, how do we know if our emotional intimacy has declined? So this is a really, really interesting question, right? Because it is a slow, steady thing. People know if they have really high conflict. You don't necessarily know if you're starting to have that roommate syndrome, slow, steady decline. So the way to think about it is finding out or thinking about, have we stopped taking risks with each other? Is everything safe? Is everything logistical? Are we not doing anything new? Are we not reaching out to our partner in a way that we didn't reach out yesterday? Because something that might have been a risk in the beginning of the relationship is no longer a risk. And that's where it kind of leads to a decline. But if you keep taking a little bit new risk, not a deep sea dive where you're feeling really terrified, but just checking out with somebody. Does this feel safe? Does this feel comfortable? Is this wanted? Am I being appreciated here? Then that's how you can tell that your emotional intimacy has declined if it's just stagnant. Okay, so Shelley, let me know if I answered that question enough, or if there's anything that you were meaning that I didn't get to it, or anybody else, please jump into the chat if there's something else that I didn't kind of that you want to add. Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Shelley. So the practical strategy for this myth is to share your authentic feelings and listen to your partners. Okay, so it's that remember we talked about emotional intimacy is interactional. It's not one way. So part of it is that you're sharing your feelings, and you're also open to hearing your partner's feelings. Okay. Now you might wonder, am I contradicting myself? Because here on the one hand, I'm saying it's not all about crying. And then I'm also saying, be vulnerable and take risks. Okay. So the reason that I want to remind you of this, and maybe even beat you on the head over a little bit, non-violently beat you over the head, is because it's also vulnerable to talk about positive feelings. It's vulnerable to say, I'm sorry. I love you. Okay. It's especially hard to say, I love you first. It's even harder to say, I love you when I'm annoyed at you because you forgot to do something that you said you were going to do. And it has to be an authentic display of positivity, not just, I love you, but you didn't blah, 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 blah. Like really remembering, like, I do love you, and you forgot to do the thing you said you were going to do. And that's going to happen a lot. If you're in a relationship with a human being, they're going to let you down. They are going to forget to do things that they agreed to do. So you're going to get annoyed at your partner. And if you want to talk about some of those deep emotions, and maybe that's comfortable, then you can. I'm just really distracted because I just got a bright green chat, which is so awesome, from Liquid Hour. Thank you for your kind words. It's really helpful. It means a lot to me. So thank you, Liquid Hour. But because it's also, so when you talk about good stuff, that's another way to be emotionally close. And you can talk about the sadness and the fears and the excitement. You can also talk about being proud. Who else do you talk to about being proud? It's kind of bragging in other situations, but with your primary romantic partner, you get to say, yeah, like, look at me go. Look at us go. You know, our kids are pretty awesome. And we did that, or we had a little part to do with it. So don't forget to say the positive stuff out loud. It's not only the negative feelings. Okay. So let's go ahead and type in the chat examples of sharing and listening to your partner's feelings that can be both positive and negative. So examples of how to talk about your feelings and how to listen, or how to show your partner that you're interested in listening in their feelings. Go ahead and if you have, so I know some people are jumping in to say that they're driving, so they might not be able to type in, but some examples would be, you know, to just come home and say, oh, I had a really stressful day. And how was your day? But asking, how was your day, at a time when you can really hear and you have a chance to hear your partner explain how their day actually was, not asking them in a way in which it looks like you don't really have time to hear their full answer. Okay. So that's that next sense of the action-oriented step of building intimacy in that regard. Okay. So myth number 4, emotional intimacy decline means you're falling out of love. So this is, hi, Nicola. Thank you for coming. It's great to see you here. Emotional intimacy decline does not mean that you're falling out of love. Okay. If you assume that, what happens is all relationships have an ebb and a flow. And they're going to have you're going to have times where relationships are really great, and you're going to have times when they're totally fine and you're not thinking about your relationship. And then you're going to have times where they're really not good. Right. By the way, if you have itsy bitsy kids, that's one of the most stressful times for parenting, is one of the lowest levels of relationship satisfaction. So there are times where there's sort of predictable ebbs and flows. And then there are just normal life ebbs and flows. Okay. The problem that I see in my office and my team sees is sometimes people think that there's something horribly wrong when they're in a very natural dip. And part of that is the way the culture displays, all of these, ways of like love is supposed to be romantic and fabulous at all times. And then people think there's something horribly wrong when their relationship is kind of boring. But it has to be boring if you want to be together for 50 years. You're gonna have a lot of moments of boredom. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mean that you're falling out of love. So intimacy and love are separate, as we talked about before. Intimacy is about connection between two people. Love is a one-way feeling. So the thing to think about is, how do you express your love out loud so that it's not just love, but it's also a shared communication of that mutuality. Okay, so examples of how to express fondness and admiration. Expressing fondness and admiration is the best way to kind of pull things back up if things start to go sideways or you feel a little bit disconnected. You're going to have more luck expressing fondness and admiration than more of the maintenance with talking about difficult emotions. Might be a little harder if you're in one of the slumps. Okay, but talking about what you like about somebody, what you love about them, how they're cute, how they're smart, how they're funny, even if you're a little annoyed at them, they still are all those great things. Okay. Nicola said, I don't know if it's Nicola or Nicola, but she says, gosh, this is your first live and you are such a natural, Laura. I will be staying for this. Thank you. My biggest thing I was nervous about, you guys, was like that I was going to show up and you wouldn't be able to hear me and there would be some audio thing and I would be like completely not know what to do. But that didn't happen. So that's good. Thanks, Jim. Enjoy the next webinar that you're going to. So, and congratulations. Okay, so if anybody wants to jump in examples of how to express fondness and admiration, it's not enough to just feel admiration. We have to actually express it out loud. Let's see. Okay, so we're on myth number 5, which is that physical intimacy and emotional intimacy are separate. Now we're getting into it, you guys. I'm ready. We're warmed up and going because we're talking about gender. We're talking about this thing that happens, right? Where people think that physical intimacy is one silo, and they think they think emotional intimacy is another silo. And then what happens is they get polarized. Okay, so let me explain what I'm talking about. So the mind-body connection is real. So what I feel directly impacts my body, and that directly impacts my cognition, and all of those things are interconnected. Shelly's jumping in. I like to compliment my husband on something about his character that I appreciate, not just something he has done. Love this, Shelly. Love, love, love this, right? Because then you're showing your husband, it's not like, oh, you're cute. It's also like, you are a generous human being and you have been loyal to me, or you are there for me in my worst times. So you're letting somebody know, not only I like you for what you do, but I like you just for sitting there. Thank you for adding that. So the mind-body connection is real. I'm going to put this a little bit larger. Okay. So this is the triad of intimacy. We've got physical intimacy, which is achieved by physical touch and being vulnerable together with our partner with how we touch each other and share our physical connection. Emotional intimacy comes from being vulnerable with our feelings, and intellectual intimacy comes from sharing our ideas and being humble with each other. Intellectual intimacy is the kind of thing where you just get into a great conversation with somebody and you can go and go and go and keep talking to each other. Okay. These 3 things are interconnected. I want everybody to, if you walk away with nothing else from this webinar, it's holding on to this reality, knowing that all of those 3 things will build on the other area in a way that you might not even expect. Okay, so you might have noticed that if somebody hugs you, you just feel a little closer. You might notice that if somebody's sad, you feel really motivated to give them a hug. You might notice that you're attracted to somebody when they're sounding really smart. You know, people are attracted to brilliance. I am, honey, you're there. So we all have these three interconnections. And if we think of them as silos, then we rob ourselves from being able to have that bridge of, wow, like when I feel close to you, I want to have closer proximity and I want to talk to you about it. And when you share your feelings, that makes me want to be, you know, that makes me feel closer to you, especially if your partner doesn't happen to have like a favorite, if their favorite circle is a little bit different than your favorite circle, that doesn't mean like you're in competition with each other. Okay, we've got Diego in here. Let's see. I often find myself telling Elisa that I love her when she's whimsical. What a great word, whimsical. I strongly believe that when we make light of ourselves and each other, even serious topics are easier to tackle. I love that. It's so true. Like when there's that lightheartedness and that, you know, feeling of being whimsical or feeling like you can just be light or somebody, you know, I think there's also times where one person might be kind of like, oh, they're like in their head. And then you have a partner that just kind of like see you and be there for you and witness you, but also kind of lift you up a little bit, which is so lovely to have that. So lovely. Shelley says, emotional intimacy often leads to physical intimacy. 100%, 100%. There's a lot of data to suggest that when we feel close, that sometimes it's easier to take risks with physical touch when we feel in a sense of emotional closeness. It goes the other way too. For some people, it's easier for them to be emotionally open when they feel like they have this physical union with somebody and they feel like they have this private special thing, and it makes them feel even more comfortable sharing some of their emotional vulnerability, especially if they were socialized to believe that it's not okay to talk about your feelings, that it might take a little bit more of one of the other ways to have that connection go. Let's see. Michael's saying, really like that, Diego, sharing humor and laughing together. Something I could definitely work on. Oh, honey, you have a great sense of humor. But yes, the sense of like what it's like to have a partner who is working with you on being your best self or showing up in a way that allows you to meet them where they are. It's a special, special gift. Okay. Guys, I know I get super hokey. Hang in there with me. It's who I am. It's not just how I am with these webinars. I can sometimes sound a little bit sappy, and that's just who I am. Okay, we got a question from Megan. I would like clarification around gender differences in emotional intimacy needs. Are the differences in nature versus nurture, or are they really many differences at all? So this is complicated. But the short answer is yes. Okay. So there absolutely are gender differences. And I'm going to do my very best to stay in my own lane here because I'm not a biologist. I'm not an evolutionary biologist. And we know that bodies, you know, part of the reason that we have them is to create babies. And there are gender differences that are specifically about that. We also know that there's pleasure that comes from being connected emotionally, physically, and intellectually. All those three things bring pleasure, and pleasure has nothing to do with baby making. Okay. So we have this weird overlap of what do we do about the fact that, you know, we don't actually know. This is a picture of Emily Nagoski. She's a sex educator and researcher, and she's done lots of, if you can follow her and read her book, especially her newest book, Come Together, is fantastic for couples to work who are working on physical intimacy specifically. She's a really great resource for that. So anyway, she talks about two kinds of desire. You've got responsive desire and you've got spontaneous desire. So I want you to think about this like a microwave and a slow cooker. This is what Gottman, that's not actually my language, it's Gottman. So spontaneous desire is like a microwave. Okay. And that's where people can feel immediate arousal. And it's what's often portrayed on movies and romance and kind of the thing that is put forward as if that's the normal thing, as opposed to over here, you've got responsive desire, which tends to be much more context dependent. So responsive desire can, people who have a tendency toward getting more aroused in a responsive way talk about things like having a lot less stress. They need to be relaxed. They need to feel comfortable. They need to feel emotionally safe. They need to feel like the bed is made. There's all of these things that are context dependent for people who have responsive desire. And for people who have spontaneous desire, it's like, what time of day is the best time of day for arousal? And they'll say anytime that ends with o'clock. Okay. So some people are just ready all the time and other people aren't. Yes, there is a gender difference, as you can see here. But I also think that we don't want to take these gender differences because we don't necessarily know. Let me go back to this. So we don't know what's nature and what's nurture. We don't know. Okay. So the fact that men might be more likely to have that sort of microwave kind of arousal, what's really important to know is that there are plenty of women who have moments of wanting to be a microwave and men who have moments of wanting to be a slow cooker or might have a preference for that overall. And what happens is it easy for a woman to say, I want to have a quickie, or does she feel bad about that or feel like that's not feminine? Is it hard for a man to ask for lots and lots of foreplay because he feels like that's not masculine? Okay, so we don't know that. So that's why I said before, it's most important to know, like, what do you like and what does your partner like, instead of like, this is what men like and this is what women like. Okay. So let me go back to this. So the other thing that Emily talks about, or Dr. Nagoski, I'm not on a first name basis with her. She talks about that many women believe that they're broken if spontaneous desire doesn't kick in. And that's because we live in a world that tells women their bodies aren't good enough. And there's a lot of messages out there that we're supposed to be a certain way. So when women feel like they're broken, it's not very sexy. And it's very, very hard to overcome that and have that connection that might be what you ultimately want. Okay. So why are we talking about all of this? Where are we going with this? The idea is that we want to avoid polarization. Okay. We want to think about it as like, pleasure is the measure. That's what Emily Nagoski says. Pleasure is the measure. And if you don't think about it in terms of a polarized way, and you're thinking about it in terms of like, I want to feel pleasure with emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, and intellectual intimacy, you want that too. We're all going to get that by being vulnerable with each other and thinking about, what do you like and what do I like? Okay. Diego, Nicola's saying she really likes what you were saying. And Elisa's saying, Diego, oh no, this is Diego. So you're saying that we might be socialized into fulfilling the gender expectation, the nurture part. Correct. So I want to stay in my lane here, but here's the risk, right? It's like, if we want it to be easy for our partner to ask for what they want, and we don't want them to feel restricted by gender in terms of just being able to say, hey, I really like this. So what I'm saying is that because we live in a world that kind of says spontaneous desire is sort of the normal desire, like that's what you're supposed to have. You're supposed to be ready to go and be hypersexual or immediately ready for sexuality, that's kind of what's to be sort of, that's what is put forward as the positive thing. then we as couples in 2025, if we want to have a healthy, intimate relationship, that we want to look at our partners as individuals first who might be impacted by the society that they were raised in or specific messages that they may have been taught as a child growing up. Okay. So I don't know if I answered your question there. So type in again. Also, there might be other people on this chat who have more to add that I might not be aware of. So please, please, please jump into a conversation with that. Okay. So those are the 5 myths. And what we're going to do now is review, because we had, wait, where did it go? Okay, so we have this question from Nuna, Amanda, Shelly, Dolores, and Adrian. Okay, so everybody wanted to know this. The same thing. How do we achieve emotional intimacy? What can we do when or if there is a decline in emotional intimacy? And that question kept coming up over and over and over again. And so in relation to do this, what I'd like to do is review the 5 different practical strategies that I gave you, because I'm a big believer in like take-home messages. After you come out of a webinar, you're like, well, wait a second. Okay, but what can I actually do tomorrow to do differently? So let's try to review. Does anybody remember any of the 5 practical strategies? If you do, go ahead and type them in the chat. And while you are doing that, I am going to start to answer some of the other questions that I got through my email. So we have a question here from Tamara. And she's saying, privacy and time alone is a deal breaker for me. I can see myself shutting down when I don't have this in a relationship. For me, it is about integrating time together, intimacy, and privacy. How do we navigate this so it's not taken as being unavailable, cold, or selfish? Okay, so thank you for answering this question, because it's such a good reminder. And a lot of times we talk about building intimacy, and that's what you'll hear relationship gurus talk about, how to build intimacy, how to be closer. But what you're talking about is a little different. It's how do you also have time alone, so that you have your space and doing your things, and your partner has time, and you have intimacy. And if one person wants more space, they're going to feel engulfed. And if you have a fear of engulfment, then when somebody comes to you with a bid for intimacy, it might actually feel like a little bit too much. Okay. So there's not an easy answer to this, other than the fact that it's really, really good to talk about it at a meta level, and to just say, look, I've noticed, when I set these boundaries, like when I want distance, sometimes that makes you feel a little nervous. And when I want close, when you want closeness, sometimes that makes me feel a little pushed away. So the thing to do is to provide reassurance. If you're the one in the relationship tomorrow that you tend to want a little more distance, I would say that you want to give your partner reassurance that your time away is not pulling away from the relationship. It's nurturing your own need for having alone time to nurture yourself. Okay. Okay. Anybody in the chat remember any of the things? No problem at all. I'm going to go back and we'll have the review. Okay. So these are the 5 practical strategies. I'll make it big. If you want, oh wait, you can't see it that way. Okay. So if you want to go ahead and take a screenshot of this, these are the 5 practical strategies that we talked about with each of the 5 myths. These are each of the 5 practical strategies. Okay. So I just wanted to put that out there. And now we will go to Amanda had a question. Okay. How do we maintain emotional and romantic intimacy in a caregiving relationship? So this is interesting, right? Because if there's a caregiving relationship, that might imply that there's a dependency, that one person depends on the other person in a certain way. And what I would say to you, Amanda, is to remember that everybody has the need for emotional connection, and everybody has different needs. So one person might have caretaking needs that one partner is taking on, but the other person also has a need for emotional closeness. And there's many, many ways to be vulnerable. So somebody's vulnerable, say perhaps they have a physical disability, then they might be physically vulnerable and need that other person's help. But it's also important that there's not that the relationship stays balanced, and there's also needs that each person is giving to the other, but it's not going to be a mirror image. In other words, there might be things that your partner can give to you, and that's very different than what you can give to your partner. But you definitely want a reciprocity where both people feel like they're able to ask for what they need and offer what they need. So I hope that helps. Amanda, I don't think she's on the call right now. Julie says, we don't talk about emotions very often. How do we find an easy way to go a little deeper with our conversation in a way that just feels natural? So this is kind of like, how do you do this stuff like in life in a way that's natural? I think there were lots of great ideas before. At the beginning of this call, we talked about just like how to ask a partner how they feel loved. It also could be that you could go slowly and kind of ask, how was your day? Like, and then if they just say fine, you can just go a little bit deeper without making it seem like they have to do the crying trauma and dumping thing, because a lot of people are really like shy about being too emotional too quickly. So I always recommend go, take a little step toward each other, test the water, see how it feels, then keep going. If it feels good, then you keep going. And if not, then you respect the other person's need for a little more distance. Okay. So I hope that helps. And we got a question from Eva. What do you do if you're no longer attracted to your partner? This is a hard one. It's a hard one. Honestly, the solution is that you have to talk about it and be honest with each other about it. If you're not honest about it, then it's going to come out sideways. Chances are that other person knows and it's there and it's available. It's not necessarily a pleasant feeling to talk about, but it's also not that it's a normal thing too. And we know that over the course of time, people's attraction changes, people's desire changes, people's, connection changes. And the more you talk about it and depathologize it, the better it is. You're not telling this person something awful. Yes, it's hard to talk about it, but you're just putting out there real information in a clear, neutral, direct way is the best way to go. Okay. So now it's time for you guys to type in any questions that you might have. Let's see. Julie's saying, we seem to do so much more of this than I realized. That's fantastic, Julie. Congratulations. Sometimes it's good when you're like, you have a refresher course and it comes out as like, oh, we're actually doing really, really well. So good job, us. Pat on the back. Who has questions? And it can be about anything at all, not just what we talked about. Oh, I totally forgot. I checked my email right before I got on the call, and I got another question from somebody who wanted to remain anonymous. And his question was about conflict. What do you do when there's a conflict and one person wants to talk about it and the other person isn't ready yet? So I have a whole lot of information on my YouTube videos all about taking a timeout. And what we do with a timeout is we make sure that we pause if things start to escalate, and then we take a 20-minute break. And the way that I talk to my couples about this is when you take that 20-minute break, you want to make sure that that you agree to come back after 20 minutes, but you don't have to talk about it after 20 minutes. You just agree that at that point in time, you'll reconnect and you'll schedule a time where you can have a repair. And then a repair is a whole nother conversation of how do you actually have a repair after you have an argument, and it's with what we call a gentle startup. So that's really useful for people to remember, that the gentle startup, usually we can't do that when we're in fight or flight. So we use the gentle startup when we are in a place where we're calm and ready to talk about it. And then you can bring up your thoughts and feelings clearly, directly, and respectfully, and you ask for what you need instead of coming across in a blaming manner. Okay. All right, you guys. So it looks like there's not any questions for now, but I just want to thank you for your commitment to relationship health. Thank you for coming and supporting me with my very, very first YouTube live. And I look forward to interacting with you guys in whatever context we might be in. And thank you for your kind words, everybody. Yes, thank you, Deborah. I hope you guys have an awesome afternoon, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.